Good afternoon. This is Quanah Parker Brightman, Executive Director of United Native Americans, coming to you today to shed some light on the Alcatraz takeover.
I formed the first militant Indian group in the United States called United Native Americans in 1968 there. We just started getting involved in picket lines, boycotts, and sit-ins, and just one thing led to another, and eventually I was involved in the takeover of Alcatraz. Well, I formed UNA, United Native Americans, in 1968. It's about a month before AIM, the American Indian Movement, and they were the most militant group in America, and it was kind of a toss-up between AIM and my group, United Native Americans. Well, see, AIM was started in Minneapolis by Dennis Banks and Clyde Belcourt, and they were working around Minneapolis, and then they spread out and started working throughout the state of Minnesota. And I had formed United Native Americans in San Francisco, and we were working basically in San Francisco, and then I started branching out. So they were working in one part of the country, and I was working in another.
I'd like to bring forth the truth about the Alcatraz takeover and who was actually there from day one of this historic occupation to reclaim all of our ancestral lands as indigenous people of the Northern Hemispheres. Contrary to popular belief, the American Indian movement was not there when we reclaimed Alcatraz. They showed up after the fact.
I wanted to do something badly, but there was no way I could do anything because I couldn't get into an organization that was doing anything. And you always hear somebody say, somebody ought to do something about that. I was saying the same thing. I said, somebody ought to form an Indian organization that's going to do something. And somebody said, well, why the hell don't you? So I got to thinking about it, and I got together with 2 or 3 people, and we formed a little group, started talking about it, and pretty soon we formed UNA, United Native Americans. And we formed it for one specific purpose, just to raise a little goddamn hell. And I raised a hell of a lot of hell. A lot of you people probably never heard of my organization, or our organization, or me, or the newspaper we produced called Warpath. But we were the first goddamn Indian militant organization in this country since the Indian movement started. We start throwing picket lines and boycotts and goddamn sit-ins and land invasions. The people who invaded Alcatraz, out of about the 20-some who invaded it, half of them were UNA members.
Dennis Banks wrote in his autobiography, within a week, about 15 of us, AIM, arrived in San Francisco. It was around November 1969. We called my friends Lehman and Trudy Brightman, who lived in the Bay Area. Lee was head of United Native Americans and published a newspaper on Indian issues. He was a powerful speaker in those days. He arranged for us to take a boat to Alcatraz to meet with the people out there. This is a direct quote from Dennis Bank out of the Ojbwa Warrior, page 106. So, yet, everyone seems to believe that AIM took over Alcatraz. I find this very appalling that the American Indian Movement, and in particularly their paper organization, be it the International Indian Treaty Council, which was founded in Standing Rock, South Dakota in 1974, years after the occupation of Alcatraz had already ended, is the organization that hosts the Alcatraz festivities every year. Now, there's also historical pictures and some footage that we restorated over at San Francisco State that we'd like to bring to everyone's attention on this. There's also a very historic picture with Harold Patty and a number of other people who are out at Alcatraz wearing UNA Indian Power buttons. Yet these have been published in a number of different books, such as You Are on Indian Land, Alcatraz Island, 1969-71, edited by Troy R. Johnson. They seem to leave out the fact that these people were, of course, UNA members. And over half of the people who took over Alcatraz in the initial occupation were, of course, UNA members. A direct quote from Dr. Lehman Brightman on the significance of the Alcatraz takeover goes as this: "History will remember Alcatraz as the first time Indians ever tried to regain their lost land. It is the best thing that has happened since Custer's last stand." Quote unquote from Dr. Lehman Brightman, my father. I had 20 students / members of UNA who took part in the Alcatraz takeover. A special thanks to all the UNA members who went on to become leaders during the Alcatraz struggle, which of course include the great Dr. Jack D. Forbes, Dr. Lenata Means Warjack, Horace Spencer, Belva Cordier, Merle Wakazu, Stella Leach, Carmen Christie, and many, many others.
That a lot of people don't know. The first people put in Alcatraz were Indians who they went into the pueblos in New Mexico, and they wanted to take the Indian children, and the Indians parents wanted to take their children out of the boarding schools, and they'd go through a religious ritual which would pass them from puberty into manhood. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs said, "No, you can't do that." And they said, "Why? We've been doing it all our life." And they said, "We don't want you to." So they did. They took the parents and put them in Alcatraz. They were the first prisoners there. There was a law. An Indian couldn't worship his religion from 1884 until the present.
There's also a letter that was written from, of course, one of the founders of the Alcatraz occupation to Dr. Lehman Brightman that was written this past October 6, 2009, from our fellow co-founder of United Native Americans, Lenata Warjack. Dear Lee, congratulations to you. It is about time that you have received recognition for your work and efforts in the Bay Area as the first director of the Native American Studies program at the University of California. A short recap of events: 40 years ago, 1966, we worked with the American Historical Society, Rupert and Josine Consulate in San Francisco. You later became the director of the American Indian Center on 16th Street in San Francisco when the old guard decided they wanted the Indian Center back. That's when we decided to form our own organization called United Native Americans, networking with Dr. Jack D. Forbes and Dr. David Risling Jr. You organized protests against the BIA for dropping our relocatees in cities with one-way tickets for employment or vocational training. It was our goal to get people into the universities and colleges and obtain professional educations. We practiced what we preached and were able to get the University of California to further our own education and continue organizing with students, organizations. Thus, the Third World Strike at UC Berkeley and the Native American Studies program was born. Now, I'd like to also bring to the attention of the fact that Richard Oakes was one of the leaders out there, as well as Adam Nordwall was out there as well. He made a cameo, but no members from the American Indian movement were actually there when the Alcatraz takeover took place. So why is it that the American Indian movement, and in particularly the International Indian Treaty Council, behooves themselves to put themselves in a position where they're wanting to play host of such a historically inaccurate event? That would be like us as United Native Americans going out to Wounded Knee and start playing host at a takeover that we did not lead. Yes, AIM was a part of it. Yes, AIM showed up, just like a number of other groups that are out there that consist of the indigenous movement. But they were not the ones who spearheaded that particular movement. It was, of course, members of the student group that was founded because United Native Americans and CIA, California Indian Education Association, helped spearhead as far as the decolonization period, which started during the Third World Strike. At that time, we had 10 Indians who had a PhD. Out of a whole race of people, only 10 Indians. And because of United Native Americans and because of CIA, California Indian Education Association, we created the Native American Studies program. Now we have thousands of Indians who have gone on to get their degree and become doctors, lawyers, engineers, and become tribal leaders and gone back into their own communities and start building up our great nations to exist and flourish in this Western society. I'd like to thank you very much. If you'd like to find more information in regards to the video footage that we've restored at San Francisco State's Television Archives, please visit the San Francisco State Television Archives, and you can find footage on day one of the Alcatraz takeover, which is KQED news reporting on November 20th, 1969, featuring American Indians relaxing on Alcatraz Island and tourists circling the island boats. There are a series of interviews with protesters who justified their occupation of the island. Dennis Turner, also a founder of United Native American, replies to a query about the potential threat of federal force being used to evict them by asking, "How can anyone refuse you legal rights to your own property?" Thank you very much, and we look forward to the next episode. Aho matakiase.